I kept the key hidden for years. It lay in a drawer that stuck when the weather turned damp, wrapped in the kind of cloth museums use when they still respect paper. On the cloth, a faded stamp from a library that hadn't existed since the war. And inside, the key, not metal, but pressed fibre, papyrus laminated on papyrus, curved like a fish's spine, inked with tiny birds and coiled ropes, and a sun rising between two hills. Hieroglyphs, yes, but arranged in a way that felt less like writing and more like a chord waiting to be played. I first saw it in Rome, in a reading room where the lamps burned low, and the custodians moved like they'd been taught not to disturb time. I was researching a dissertation about the way the Index Librorum Prohibitorum shaped the boundaries of acceptable history, how a single list could make voices vanish. That day, a librarian slid me a folder with a look that meant, "We don't catalogue everything." Inside the folder was a photograph of the key, its ink a little darker, its edges less frayed. The caption said, "Deposited anonymously 1937, no provenance." That should have been the end. You don't chase the undocumented. But I took the photograph anyway, and later, in a market near the Tiber, where old things pretend to have stories, a bookseller pressed a bundle into my hands and said, "For your paper." I didn't tell him my topic. I didn't tell him my name. When I got it home and opened it, the same key waited, humming a feeling the way a shell holds a sea. It smelled of linen and myrrh. The ink lines, the little hawk for Horus, the upraised arms of the car, the zigzag waters, were so thin they might have been whispered. No inscription said "use me," and no instruction said how. But some objects teach you how to hold them. I placed the key on my desk, turned off the lamp, and read the shapes aloud, slowly, the way Jean-François Champollion warned readers to do when they were still learning, to respect the difference between a sign and a sound. The room cooled, not a draft, something deeper, as if the air had decided to stand still and listen back. I read again, the mouth sign, the reed leaf, the quail chick. The phrase resolved into a cadence I'd seen in transcriptions of the pyramid texts, older than the Book of the Dead, older than any psalm I'd grown up with, not a prayer, an address. In Egyptian magic, they called it Heka. Not tricks, not spells in the modern sense, but the force that brought things into being and kept them from falling apart. If you shape sound with knowledge, the old temple manuals say, you can shape the world. I did not expect the floor to tilt. It wasn't violent. It felt like a boat turning to face a current. The light thinned until the things on my shelves were silhouettes of themselves, and the city beyond the window lost its depth, the way fog erases distance without erasing the street. A faint odor, resin and river mud, rose from somewhere. That couldn't exist in my apartment. I heard the soft rattle of a sistrum, that ancient papyrus-shaped instrument used by priestesses of Hathor to keep rhythm with the breath of the gods. When I breathed, my breath came back gilded. And then the room was not my room. The desk was a smooth stone slab flecked with mica, the walls a skin of golden ochre, and the ceiling held up by columns banded with blue like lapis. Through a doorway, hung with reed curtains, I saw what my childhood books had promised, and what the scholarship later complicated: a courtyard open to a hot, exacting sky, a pool that copied the sky so closely I felt it might drown the clouds. The air was thick with the green of crushed juniper and the sharpness of frankincense. Somewhere, a line of women sang a phrase so simple it sounded like breathing, and the columns vibrated as if they understood. I had stepped into Thebes, not a ruin, not a reconstruction, Wazit as the people there would have named it, alive. It should be said, here and gently, that I was not the first to time travel. Not with machines or theatrical storms, but with language, with ritual speech, with the precise cadence of names spoken in sequence. Paleography tells us the signs carry not only meaning, but instructions: where to place the tongue, how to shape the throat, when to sustain a vowel so the sound matches the chamber's length. Egyptologists who study the acoustics of hypostyle halls have shown that certain frequencies, sung along colonnades and under low stone ceilings, produce standing waves that hang like drapery in the air. When I read the key, it tuned me to a corridor that had been waiting for millennia. A priest met me. He wore linen so fine it was almost an idea of cloth, and a wig, cut with a mathematical attention I would later see echoed in the plans of cathedrals. Around his neck an amulet rested, an ankh, the looped cross that Greeks mistook and Christians borrowed and tourists now fight to trademark. He did not look surprised. That was the first mercy of the past. People who traffic in the sacred expect arrivals from angles the present would call impossible. He said a name, not mine, and the name felt like a cup offered with two hands. "I am a visitor," I said. In that place my breath carried words in Middle Egyptian, the way a dream allows you to speak to your dead without puzzling over grammar. He inclined his head as if to say, "Of course you are." "I was reading," I added. He smiled. "Then you are already here," he said. He led me through the court to a room that faced east, toward a gate designed to catch the first blade of sun. On the wall, a procession of hieroglyphs marched in lines I recognized from the coffin texts, each sign crisp, the paint not yet thinned by air. He touched the mouth sign with a finger that smelled faintly of cedar oil. "This is what your people will misunderstand," he said softly. "You think our script is picture-in-picture, only that we told stories to keep the night away. We keep night away, yes, but the signs are instructions. They are the shape of the breath when truth passes through." "Heka," I said. He nodded, pleased, as if a child had correctly recited a phrase meant for winter. "Everything that rises in this room rises because of Heka," he said. "We do not conjure, we align." He brought me to a low chest carved with stars and opened it with a bronze tool that sang against the lid. Inside lay a papyrus rolled around a rod of sycamore. The outer layer was painted with a band of sky, nut blue and dotted with 5-pointed stars that modernity insists are childish until you stand under them and feel how they steady your thinking. He unrolled the first length and revealed a column of text whose format I knew. Not the funerary spells of the later Book of the Dead, but the older utterances, instructions the living spoke over the dead, so the dead remembered how to be living. "We call this not a spell book," he said, "but a pathway. Your scholars will give it numbers. They will argue over the order. They will translate it into languages that do not carry breath as well as ours, but they will feel it anyway." He read a line, not loudly, not theatrically. The stone noticed. The hair on my forearms rose in a slow wave. The pool outside made a small sound like a tongue being lifted from the roof of the mouth. "What do you feel?" he asked. "Alignment," I said. "As though the room has found its own center." He nodded. "The first power of Heka is correspondence, not your later occult handbooks, no. The correspondence of what is said with what is. When a word describes reality precisely, reality prefers to match it. That is why imprecision is a moral risk. He let me read the next line. It was the name of a wind I did not know I knew. "The taste of desert freed from heat, like the cool that lives inside shade." When I finished, the curtains at the doorway stirred inward. He smiled, not proud, simply glad to see things behaving. "I used the key to come," I said, "but I did not know where it would open." "The key is not a key," he said. "It is a mouth." You opened your mouth in the right way, so a door that prefers truthful mouths opened. Your people will build great doors with iron. Ours are shaped with breath. The day unfolded like a prayer written in sections. He showed me amulets, a scarab backed with a tiny chapter of the heart spell. The one modern edition's number as 30B, telling the heart not to betray the soul at judgment. He let me hold a wedja, the eye of Horus, carved in faience so green it seemed grown. He placed in my palm a sliver of stone with a thread hole, the tiet, the knot of Isis, which he said guided blood the way certain hymns guide memory. He described how the opening of the mouth ceremony restored the faculties of speech and sight to the dead, not by theatrics, but by reminding the body of the divine pattern it had always carried. We do not force the door, he said. We remind the door it is a door. As the sun lowered, he led me to a side chapel, seated along the temple's axis, a place designed for a single beam, to find it only twice a year. He pressed his palm to the wall. An image flared briefly, not painted light, but the shimmer stone gives off when it's stroked by a sun it has known longer than calendars. He spoke of geometry, not as abstract relief, but as participation. The length of the hall measured to the human step, the height of the columns set to a ratio that kept the heart from beating too fast. Sacred geometry, your modern teachers will call it, he said, but for us it is simply proportion as prayer. I told him of what came after, of Christianity's arrival, of Coptic hymns that kept a little of the old cadence, of Gnostic gospels that spoke in parables the way Nile priests did when the words were too strong to hand out on the street. I told him of the way Anubis had been painted as a devil, his jackal head sharpened into something your nightmares could understand, of how Set, who once stood for necessary change, had been stripped to chaos alone. I spoke of Thoth press-ganged into Hermes Trismegistus, then dismissed as a late forgery when the Renaissance grew nervous about how early the wisdom sounded. He listened without scandal. Names change when power changes, he said. It is an old rule. Another rule, the new power needs the old power's light, so it takes the light and tells the people the lamp was always theirs. He did not say Vatican. He did not need to. What did you fear? I asked. Your enemies, your devils? He considered this with the courtesy a teacher owes a serious student. Forgetfulness, he said. Forgetfulness is the only demon we honor with constant attention. We moved to the roof as a coolness grew, and a darkness that had weight settled the way a cloak settles on a patient man. He traced with a reed the line of Sirius and the curve of Orion and the spill of the Milky Way, which Egyptians called a heavenly river reflecting the Nile. He named Sopdet Sirius, whose heliacal rising told farmers when floods would come. He explained astrotheology without the word, festivals set to stellar alignments, not because stars make gods, but because the sky's order teaches the mind to think in order, and ordered minds make fewer cruel mistakes. He let me hear a chant meant for this hour. 3 tones, then 2, then a low, sustained vowel that sat in the belly until it felt like a hand had set a lamp there. In later years, I would read about neurotheology, about how certain frequencies encourage theta states and reconstruct feelings of presence. That night, I accepted the simpler truth. Sound can hold you the way sleep does without taking you under. Below us, someone moved along the colonnade with a small oil lamp. The flame bent, unafraid. He looked at me then, not unkindly. You have not come only to receive, he said. You carry a question that did not let you rest. I thought of the drawer, the cloth, the key. I thought of catalogue numbers that return no records, of banned books that never left notes about why, of scholars whose footnotes grew careful when certain gods entered the room. It is said, I began, that in an age to come, men who keep libraries for a church will keep things from the people, papyrus, amulets, scrolls, not because they are wicked, but because they fear that if people can speak to the divine without a priest, the institution will fade. He smiled, the way one does when a friend finally names the stone in their shoe. Some houses, he said, are built to keep out weather. Some are built to keep in memory. The first kind fears storms, the second kind fears nothing. Tell me of your house. It is built on authority, I said, and schisms and declarations that certain books are safe and others are dangerous. It keeps a list, forbidden knowledge, and that list has changed. And then it was abolished publicly, but some things remain forbidden quietly. And you? He asked. What will you forbid? The only honest answer was the answer the place had already given me. Forgetfulness. He placed a palm over his ankh and nodded once. Then learn what must be remembered. We ate bread that tasted like wheat should taste, and dates that had trapped a sun inside them that no winter could steal. He poured beer better than modern beer by the simple method of not fighting its nature. When I thanked him, he said thanks were a coin that paid for nothing here, and asked for a story instead. So I told him about a Frenchman, brilliant and sickly, who looked at the Rosetta Stone until it looked back, and how, when he read the first true sentence, the tears made his brother's handwriting tremble. The priest listened to Champollion as if he were an initiate who'd finally found the back door. Your people will write many books about that door, he said. Some will be good, some will be afraid to be good. You will be tempted to turn fear into conspiracy because fear sells. Do not. Tell them the true story. Heike is not domination. It is alignment. The mouth tells the world what it truly is, and the world recognizes itself. And if someone uses it to bend others, then they have forgotten its first law. What is not true cannot hold. They will speak loudly and briefly. We walked the processional way in a quiet that felt clean. He showed me a tiny niche where a cat had once been entombed with the carefulness owed to a cousin. He tapped a brick that bore a maker's mark, the way masons sign their work. He showed me a chisel mark only a trained eye would see, and explained that sometimes the gods preferred small proof. Grand gestures are for kings, he said. Precision is for priests. I asked to see the opening of the mouth not as a spectacle but as learning. And the next day, which came on like the slow tilt of a bowl pouring light, he brought me to a room where a family waited in the way families have always waited, trying not to offend grief by rushing it. The body lay adorned and quiet. The priest holding the ritual adze moved with a care that made the air want to move like that too. The first formula was not shouted, it was remembered. When he touched the lips, he did not activate the dead, he addressed the bar and car, reminding them of their old agreements. When the room filled with the feeling of a face just about to wake, no one screamed. They breathed together as if breath were a rope they'd decided to pull in the same direction. If you've read the literature on ritual studies, you'll know the difference between performance and participation. We were participants, and the ritual was Heike, written in the grammar of kindness. When it ended, the family's tears were not the modern kind that mean we are broken. They were the acknowledged water of passage. The priest set the adze down as one sets a pen down after writing a clean line. Later, I would think of textual criticism, how scholars compare manuscripts, weighing variants, to decide what the original might have said. The opening of the mouth is textual criticism of the soul. You restore the reading the time smudged. I asked if they feared thieves, charlatans, those who would sell Heka by the bottle. Fear, he said with gentle humour. We have Sekhmet for fear. His eyes warmed. But we do watch. We have always watched. In your age they will still be watching. My days, if days they were, became a net that caught only what was needed. I learned the 4 cardinal sounds used to stabilize the mind before working with names. I learned the gesture one makes when entering a chamber aligned to the solstice, a small pivot of the chest to acknowledge the axis. I learned why Isis carries a throne on her head, not for decoration, but as a sentence. The seat makes the king does not make the seat. I learned that Osiris's green skin is not mythic nonsense. It is an agricultural mathematics, death as germination in a medium that knows what to do with darkness. And I learned that the quickest way to lose Heka is to lie. Not lie to others, the priest corrected softly when I said this. Full of the righteousness the young and the time lost wear like cologne. Lying to others is clumsy and time will clean it. Lying to yourself unthreads your breath. Then when you speak, the world hears 2 voices and refuses to answer. On the last morning, I sensed its lastness, the way a tide knows when the moon has had enough. The priest led me to the same room where I had first named the wind. The key was on the slab, exactly as I had set it in my century. He placed beside it a small scarab, unremarkable except that its underside was inscribed with a phrase so short it could not be an incantation, and so exact it could only be Heka. May the mouth speak only what is. He gestured. I read it. The room steadied itself again. This, he said, tapping the scarab, you may carry without theft. I have questions, I said, about Akhenaten and his solar revolution, about whether Hermetic texts were cafe copies of temple manuals or siblings raised apart, about whether the Vatican ever truly built a vault under an obelisk, and whether a list can ever silence a river. I asked softer if the long habit of institutions to hoard sacred things had ever done anything but make the light inside them grow stale. He took my hand in the way fathers do when they know a son has remembered to weep without prompting. Light does not stale, he said, but men do. Your work is not to tear vaults open. It is to speak cleanly so that when cracks appear, and they always do, the light that comes out is understood. He guided my fingers over the key, bird, reed, mouth, water, sun, horizons, and waited while I said the shapes again. The air cooled as before, but this time I noticed a second current, a thread drawn not from room to room, but from breath to breath, as if my lungs had been practicing for a part I'd forgotten they'd auditioned for. Tell them, he said, that Egyptian magic is not a threat to anyone who does not intend to own God. Tell them Heka is what happens when speech and reality agree to be less lonely. Tell them that if they fear the old words, they fear their own mouths. The light thinned the way paper thins over a lamp, and the pool outside found a new sky to copy. My desk returned, old stain and all. The key lay where I'd left it. The scarab lay beside it, modern weight and ancient certainty. Somewhere far away a tram bell rang, shy of its own echo. I wrote for hours, then days. I wrote in the voice that had been called mine, and the one that had been lent. I wrote about Anubis as guardian, not ghoul. About Set as change you negotiate, not evil you refuse to name. About Thoth, Hermes as philology's patron, the god of getting words right. I wrote about resurrection before the resurrection. Spell 168, the heart weighed against Maat's feather, and why justice is a scale, not because we like balance metaphors, but because equilibrium is what truth feels like when you breathe it. When I sent the first paper to a journal known for its careful eyebrows, the reviewer wrote, compelling, if a little, luminous. I took luminous as a warning and a blessing. Then I did the practical work: footnotes, verifications, textual variants, Coptic parallels, Nag Hammadi citations, late antique hymnody. I filed records requests for catalogue entries that officially do not exist. Some came back blank, some came back redacted, and one came back with a single line uncommented in a sea of black, transferred to private, ecclesiastical custody. Not proof, but a familiar cadence. At night, when the city settled into the sentence, sleep writes across glass, I read aloud the scarab's short phrase, "May the mouth speak only what is." The room steadied, the mind steadied. On rare evenings, a soft rattle in the hall answered, metal on metal, like the ghost of a sistrum reminding me that rhythm is older than doubt. I do not claim to own a vault. I do not claim to have catalogued all that is kept. I claim this: the most forbidden knowledge is often the knowledge no one profits from you remembering. That Heka is not the enemy of churches. Control is. That the Vatican did not fear the devil as much as it feared the day when the people might discover the ancient Egyptian-taught joy of speaking to the divine without permission. And that joy, once tasted, is difficult to unlearn. One more thing: if you ever find a key that looks like a fish's spine, do not rush. Hold it the way you'd hold a name you haven't earned the right to say. Sit by a window. Let the air quiet itself until you can hear what your breath has been trying to tell you for years. Then read. A little, not much. Let the room tip like a boat turning toward a current. And if you arrive in a hall where the columns hum and a priest smiles as if you finally made your appointment, tell him you came because someone asks you not to forget. He will approve. He will show you the wall where the mouth sign waits, and he will let you speak. Speak cleanly. And when the room steadies, carry that steadiness into the places that call themselves modern. Speak it into kitchens, into buses, into churches, if they'll have you. Speak it quietly into your own fear. You are not commanding, you are aligning. You are doing Egyptian magic the way the old masters did, with breath that tells the truth until reality nods. Sleep now. The story keeps itself. The river remembers its banks. The door remembers it is a door. And your mouth remembers how to open.